Each season, summer, fall, and winter, spring, the Loft schedules a huge variety of classes, both for adults and for youth. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a teaching artist who instructs the latter, Kristi Romo. Kristi, could you introduce yourself and tell us how you got involved at the Loft?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kristi Romo. I'm a high school English and reading teacher. And I started writing when I was little, but really seriously writing when I just took one semester off, I thought, or on a sabbatical. I just take one semester at Hamlin University in their MFA for Children and Young Adults program. And then I discovered that um, it was what I needed. It wasn't just like a thing. It was something that I absolutely needed. And after that, I got to take some classes at the Loft, and that's how I became involved because I still wanted to learn, and I had so much more to learn. And I feel like that's just how life is. There's always more to learn. And so I took a picture book writing class, and I loved it, and have some manuscripts from that. So it was really, really fun.
So, obviously, you have a lot of experience teaching kids since you are a high school English teacher. And I'm wondering for you, how do you approach going into a setting like the Loft where you're teaching pretty strictly creative writing versus a more academic setting?
Absolutely. Well, even in an academic setting, for me, it doesn't matter. Um, the environment is critical. It's really, really important. And especially when it's creative writing, you need to kind of get to know people and trust each other so you can take some creative risks and share things and try things. And I think that's super important. I also want to know what my students, adults, kids, teenagers are interested in. So what do they care about, and how can we bring that into what we're doing? That's really, really important to me. And also having opportunities to share and ask questions and feel really comfortable doing those things.
Absolutely. And that brings to mind too, thinking of everything that, kids have been going through, same as adults, but, are very affected by the environment, are affected by politics, are affected by this pandemic, obviously.
Mhm.
And so when you think about bringing those things into the classroom, how upfront are you about what's going on in the world, and how much space do you leave for kids to really get into things that might be sort of scary for them?
Yeah, well, I think too often people want to shelter kids from all of those things, but they're so aware. And they hear snippets of adult conversations or pieces of news, and they have a lot of questions. And I'm not one who purports to having all the answers, but I think it's really important that kids feel safe asking questions. I do think we need a balance, right? We also want to be able to um, go off and explore and have fun. I mean, kids would gladly talk for an hour about all of their fears. But I think that having some space to process and think about those things, and then think about, how can I do something about that as a writer? How can I take that feeling and use that to explore something? How can I write something that says how I feel and what I think about it? I think giving kids voices um, to speak about things that they are curious about and frustrated about or worried about is really essential in being able to kind of face those and come up with a sense of courage, or um, even, what's my answer to this? How do I feel about this right now? I think that's really important in whatever work they're doing whenever that's happening.
Speaking of the sort of sense of, you gave me this
Yeah.
perfect segue. The class that you're teaching is one of our sense of adventure classes, which is
Hmm.
really focusing on storytellers and adventurers. And that's a little bit difficult right now. So
Hmm.
what is it that you're bringing to the class that you think just really captures the spirit of adventure?
Well, I love the what if questions. What if this happened? Or what if this person ran into that person? What might happen? I think those are really fun questions to explore. And I think they also go along with the fears and worries that we have. And we can kind of play those out in a safe way without having to experience them firsthand, hopefully. Um, but it also gives us power over story. And so, for instance, we're creating our own hero and our own villain. And what we're going to do is look at what our favorite heroes are. How did the author do that? What were the words? What were the actions? What were the appearances of that hero? And then how can we do that, use that strategy in our own way to create our own hero? And same with a villain. Who are our favorite villains? We have favorite villains. I know that sounds wrong, but we have favorite villains. And so what is it that we're doing, or how are they created, and how can we also create them? I think one of the coolest things to think about is like a villain actually thinks they're the hero of their story, and we don't think about that. And so how can we write a story that thinks about that, and explores those things in our own kind of practice before we get to the final product of what we're creating?
I'm interested in a two-part question. One, just what inspired you for this class, because it's so creative and I feel like so fun. And also just what inspires the classes you teach in general.
Well, I've always loved like fantasy and adventure. Oh man, dragon books were my favorite for a long, long time. I still love a good dragon book. And I feel like um, it, I get to go off on adventures that aren't even possible, and experience them and feel like I learned something new about myself and the world. And so I just think that's super fun to explore that, and to even create just a scene from that is really, really fun, um, to think of the impossible and making that possible. What was the second part of the question?
And then just what inspires your classes generally.
Oh, absolutely. So, what inspires my classes is I think it's really fun, um, to find a voice and to create voices. Actors kind of change the physical makeup of their voice and their facial expressions to change, um, when they're changing characters, when they act out different characters. But how can we do that with language? How can we play with that and figure out how we would say something without the visual, and how someone might react and then describe that? I think it's just really fun to think about, um, playing with words and seeing what happens next. We'll try that. Let's see. Well, should I try this? Why not? If it doesn't work, that's okay. Now you know that doesn't work, but you might discover something pretty amazing if you just kind of try it.
And you can draw, either from these creative writing classes or your high school classes for this, but I'm
Mhm.
wondering when a class is over and, you've walked out the door, what is it that makes you feel like a class has been successful?
Oh, it's been the same the whole time. A kid going something along this line. I had no idea about whatever, right? Like, oh my goodness, just the excitement of discovering something new, or realizing that they can do something that they couldn't do before. Um, like just that growth and change, and being able to, um, get energy from that is really, really exciting. But I think for me personally too, I walk out going, I had no idea I could do that, or that, that kid really made me think about things in the world differently, or how I teach differently. And so I think this idea of discovery is kind of life's adventure. And I think teaching is one of the most exciting things you can do, because, um, it's not that I want kids to think or write or be like me. I want them to think and be and write like them. And so discovering how to do that is is so exciting to watch that happen. Someone to grow up and become their own person. I have students now who own cupcake stores and macaroon stores, and to see their creativity in that way, and how they tell their own story about what they're doing and why they're doing it, is so exciting. And so I like to write, and I think it's fun to write. But our stories are, there's just so many possibilities.
I'd like to get a little bit more specific for what you just said, because you
Mhm.
got your MFA in writing for children and young adults, and you also teach children and young adults. So, how do you feel your time in the classroom affects the writing that you make for that same audience?
Oh, that's a really great question. Um, One of the most essential things I've learned as a teacher is to be a kid watcher. Now, somebody might say that's creepy, but to really study what is it like to be a kid? Because honestly, adults forget, and I'm an adult. I've been an adult for a long time, and we forget. And so, to watch kids, to listen to what they're actually saying, to hear what their troubles are, to hear what they're excited about, and to care about it. Um, those are what fuel my writing. Um, I find sometimes I teach a lot of 12th grade students, and they're just about to go out into the world on their own. And it's interesting because I found myself saying a lot of the same things over and over as the years went on. And I was like, oh, this is like a universal lesson kids learn. I could write a story about that because that would relate to everybody. And I think I've got some things to say. I've got some advice that I've seen work for kids. So that's also it gives me like, oh, this is what kids care about.
On a broader level, thinking of
Hmm.
the field as a whole, what is it about literary arts, especially literary arts aimed at youth, that really resonates with you?
Hmm. It's well, first of all, I think they're some of the greatest people we have is young people. They're so fun, and their energy and their hope and their enthusiasm is is what inspires me, and I think it inspires a lot of people, and we don't even realize it. And one thing I learned in the classroom was I had kids read these stories. They were historical fiction, and I had students come to me and say, "Why didn't anybody teach us this in history?" And I said, actually, I know you learned it in history. It's in this unit, in this grade, and this whatever. And they're like, yeah, but I didn't like, why is it different? I'm like, because stories matter, because stories change the world. Stories change your mind. When you walk in the shoes of somebody who has a very different experience from you and see it from their perspective, or you're walking alongside them in the story, it changes your heart, not just our minds. But if we're ever going to change our minds about something, our heart has to change first. And I think stories do that. And I think music tells those stories. I think poetry moves us in those ways. I think theater. So I mean, I've started painting, and that has changed my heart. And I think the arts have so much to offer because it doesn't just speak to facts. It it shows us what the facts mean, and it shows us what the possibilities are as well.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true and very beautifully said. Our final question is just getting to
Mhm.
know a little bit more about you. So, when you aren't teaching or you aren't writing or reading books about dragons,
Right.
what is it that you can usually be found doing?
I love to cook. I love to cook. It is my creative expression, and so I'm usually making not complicated meals, but I look at a recipe and go, "Yeah, I'll try something close to that." But what if I add this, or what if I add that? I'm also playing Polly Pocket with my 4.5-year-old daughter, and I'm inventing new creations with my 8-year-old son. And my 11-year-old son and I are talking about basketball. We talk a lot about basketball because he wants to be an NBA star someday. And so we're talking about Damian Lillard and Stephen Curry. So we're talking about all the things. But yeah, it's pretty fun.
Oh, I think that sounds like a great dream. I wish him all the best of luck.
Yeah, I will tell him.
Well, Kristi, thank you so much for being here with us today. For our viewers, you can find Kristi's classes as well as our full winter spring lineup by visiting loft.org/classes. And I'm so excited to see what your class brings, Kristi. I think it sounds so fun.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you all there.